Hello everyone, this is Soul with another video, and kind of as promised, I wanted to talk about, or I wanted to cover the interview, the Q&A that happened between Mike and Ian Hazzikostas, game director of World of Warcraft. It was a good interview. I had a lot of anxiety at first. Why should I even be anxious? But I had a lot of anxiety going into it because I was kind of worried that this was going to feel like a referendum. That Mike was going to just kind of like string Ian up and be like, oh, why is this game so bad, yada, yada, yada. And now there were some pretty passionate questions that kind of gotten to the core of, why is the state of Shadowlands the way that it is? But I think that both speakers did an excellent job of speaking for their respective camps. Ian coming from trying to speak for all players as much, as best as he could. And Mike coming from the perspective mostly from the higher band of the community. We're talking about people that run high-end Mythic Plus, people that are Mythic Raiders, people that do tournaments, that sort of thing. And there are legitimate concerns, but overall I think the energy that they gave off is really good. I'm going to employ bullet points from Wowhead as well as MMO Champion to assist me. I did watch the whole thing, and I do advise watching this whole thing. It lasts for about an hour. I'll provide a link to this below wherever I can once I'm able to find it. And yeah, let's get right into it. First off, there were reassurances from Ian that this is not going to be a repeat of Warlords of Draenor. This is not going to be one of those cases like, oh, it's going to be like Warlords of Draenor where there's like a patch, there's like a 9.1 coming and then 9.2 and like that's it. That's not how it's going to be. We are still going to get, the full round of, we get season 1 right now. We're going to have that season 2, season 3, and so on and so forth. Obviously, the time gap between season 1 and season 2 is incredibly long, and just to put this out front, we still don't have a good time frame as to when 9.1 is going to come out. There were no comparisons to the TBC beta or anything like that, so it's just a matter of let's kind of see how this thing goes, and we'll adjust our projections from there. So in a sense, you can kind of stop watching now. You can you can just be like, okay, cool. So I can stay unsubbed for like a little while. Sweet. And that's totally fine. Let's not try to keep people like chained to the game. You have to play the game or else you're an unloyal Blizzard fan. No, don't let anyone keep you down like that. If people want to just kind of like sit on the sidelines and wait, great. If you want to be like me and farm anima in the meantime and get a bunch of alts up, hey, that's totally fine too. And then Mike talked about Korthia. And he was wondering, like, okay, what's going on with Korthia right now? Things feel really bare bones right now. And Ian agreed because it is really bare bones. There is a lot that's going to be coming in Korthia. According to him, there's going to be like random events going on. There's going to be more daily quests included. There's, of course, the campaign, which hopefully more of it is going to be accessible or testable in the next upcoming build. He did bring up something really cool, though, the idea that there's going to be upgradable gear in Korthia, in that zone. So it's going to have that feel of Mana Pearls, Ian said, but without the random procs where before we bought those tokens and then we just kind of like we kept rolling those tokens in order to get like the best thing or the best proc or something like that. It looks like it's going to be much more straightforward, although we don't know if there's going to be any of those included bonuses or anything like that. What it sounds like, though, it sounds like that's what we were talking about when I mentioned the Maw-touched whatever it is. But what we're probably going to get, tokens that we can use, and we unlock for a spec. Maybe they'll have a special effect on it. I don't know, but it might be fixed. And from there, as we're playing through the content, we get currencies or we get something, and then we'll be able to upgrade this gear. Now, I know that there's going to be some reactions from some folks that are like, "Oh my gosh, another currency!" But I think it's well understood at this point that in order to manage these sorts of like kind of temporary features, a currency is like really the best way to do it. Otherwise, you're going to have, big ballers like me. Not really a big baller, but you're going to have people that'll just pump gold into it, and then ta-da, they'll be able to get far ahead of everyone else, and that doesn't feel fair. It feels like people have to like over prepare beforehand just so they can prepare for this temporary system, that sort of thing. But you know, enough about the currency stuff. We all feel like a little bit differently on that. But I do like the idea that doing Korthia stuff will get you Korthia things, that will get you higher item levels or just more power beyond just what you get from like the mission table or what you get from upgrading anima rewards. It's a big concern among people outside of the big three that they want to do a little bit more. That isn't just, oh, well, we should just be learning how to raid and do Mythic Plus and things like that. The cold reality is there's just so many different kinds of players out there, and I'm really happy that Ian drove that point home and be like, okay, Mike, I know that this is how you feel about these things, but we can't forget about all the other players. And again, I appreciate that. Then Mike asked about the super special Sylvanas bow and the quiver. Unfortunately, he didn't ask specifically about survival hunters using that, which is really unfortunate. I was hoping that Mike would have been able to squeeze that in, so maybe survival hunters are going to feel screwed. Maybe it'll have some like cool thing where it'll just convert to a spear magically or something like that. That'd be kind of neat. If changing your spec to that will let it metamorphosize or something like that. I kind of remember in vanilla, right? Wasn't the epic the epic thing, you could use it and then it would convert to that. Yeah, I barely remember that, so please correct me, commenters. He got a little bit into like kind of like, okay, why they decided to change it from an ability changer, because before the bow would change your kill shot to this wailing arrow ability. That was changed to make it into a new ability thanks to the old artifact system. They just kind of repurposed that. But in this case, it is going to be unique. Only hunters are going to get like this special thing because it's a Sylvanas boss, whatever. The one thing that I'm not entirely sure about though, which I'll talk a little bit more about the raid stuff, about raid gear, the Sylvanas bow effect, it might be something that retains its full power outside of raid, which actually is going to be a longer term concern of mine. If this wailing arrow ability is something that scales well throughout the rest of the expansion, is that going to mean that every hunter is going to be trying to go for this bow like forever? I'm a little bit mixed on that. Then Mike asked about legendaries and asked for kind of an update based on the previous interview about how refunding legendaries or disenchanting legendaries, how that's going to work out in 9.1. And unfortunately, it seems like Ian doesn't have, or the team doesn't have any plans for it in this patch, which is really unfortunate because they're introducing so many new legendaries in that are Covenant specific, and so that's going to like do some weird things. Now it is something that they've acknowledged that it's something that they want to work on for the longer term. I just really wish that it was something that they were going to do sooner. When it comes to Soul Ash, I'm hoping that we'll be able to like earn even more of that in Torghast as we climb these higher layers. I guess I am just going to talk about Soul Ash and Torghast. So there are going to be a total of 12 layers in Torghast. Layers 9 through 12, they are going to drop this Mega Soul Ash or Soul Cinders or whatever they are. These Soul Cinders are going to be like an exclusive reagent that's going to be used to upgrade your legendaries past that 235 level. So Soul Ash is still going to drop. So like if you clear a 12, you're still going to get all of that Soul Ash goody stuff. And those values and the costs of getting your legendary from nothing to that 235, it's still going to cost that certain amount. The confusing part right now that hasn't been clarified yet is, well, what if I want to make a legendary from scratch and make it all the way to the highest item level straight? Do I need both the Soul Ash and the Soul Cinders for something like that? Is there going to be some sort of skip? Can I just use the Soul Cinders in lieu of the Ash? I'm guessing no. I'm guessing that it's going to require both reagents to do. But the hope is that the upcoming changes to Torghast, which I'll get into in just a bit, that they'll compel people to complete these runs in that people will just have more fun doing it. Then they talked about Torghast, and there are some pretty exciting things to talk about. A lot of it is sort of samey. Like I said, when talking about Soul Ash, I'm not quite sure what they mean about, when you complete a layer 12, is there going to be additional Soul Ash that you get from layers 9 through 12, or is it going to be, only Soul Ash drops from the first 8 layers, and then, layers 9 through 12, they're going to drop the Soul Cinders. Now, obviously, clearing a 12, you get all that stuff. You get everything that you get before it, but I'm hoping that between layers 9 through 12, you get even more Soul Ash on top of that. I think that's going to go a long way towards helping just crafting legendaries for the sake of being able to experiment, things like that. Just going beyond that whole, I think, 1150 that you get a week right now. I'm hoping that that goes up by quite a bit. But probably the most exciting thing that I'm seeing in Torghast so far is with regards to a talent tree. Now, you guys might remember that in over outside in the maw, you can buy these little upgrades and you use Stygia to do it. And I wasn't very fond of the disconnection because you had to do maw stuff in order to get Torghast upgrades. And I would think to myself, well, wouldn't it be more better? Wouldn't it be more gooder to get Torghast upgrades from, running Torghast? So it looks like they're resolving that. They're going to have some sort of system in place where, even if you don't do so great in your Torghast runs, you're still coming away from it with, I guess, what they call tower knowledge. And those are going to be some additional perks. So there are going to be additional perks coming from running Torghast. One big mentionable was auto loot. And that was something that I know that a lot of content creators, I don't think I agreed with it at the time, but I think it's going to be a great thing now because, yeah, I do wonder what other perks are going to come out of it. Is there going to be like permanent speed boosts? Maybe there can be, at the very start of your climb, you can have a larger selection of powers to choose from. Maybe all of the things you can start off with can be epic. Maybe you can start doing the Torghast brawls right away, or, you can get access to those brawl perks. I think those were really cool too. They did clarify a little bit. Again, I'm kind of repeating myself here. They did clarify that there's no longer going to be a death counter, that there is going to be instead a kind of score count. No matter what you do, as long as you finish the run, you'll still get all the Soul Ash and the Soul Cinders that you want to get. Getting a high score is going to be what helps you qualify for those higher difficulties, layers 9 through 12. But we're not quite sure what the score really means, actually. It's kind of weird. Ian was talking as if, okay, if you go slow and thorough, you can get a very high score. If you go fast and you rush through, you can get a very high score. You can get to that same point regardless of your gameplay, regardless of your playstyle, whether you're in a group or solo, regardless of your role. But because it is all kind of evened out, what's the point? And that's something that they didn't really get into yet. Supposedly there's going to be Torghast updates coming in this upcoming build, so you can count on me covering more of this as this goes along. And the last thing from Torghast is that they didn't really talk about gaining XP. I know that Mike asked about, hey, can you get XP in Torghast? Because there was some data mined information on that. Unfortunately, that's not a thing. But Ian did talk about Mythic Plus like affixes, which to me sounds like torments, those torment buffs that we were seeing. But there's also going to be perks called blessings, he said. That might have something to do with that Torghast talent progression sort of dealy. But again, we're gonna have to wait and see what's to come in this next build. I'm kind of excited about it though. I know I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. They kind of went a little bit out of order as to the topics that they were talking about, but Mike did ask about the Shards of Domination gems, and Ian was pretty quick to sort of correct and say, hey, this is like a really early look. This is nothing close to final yet. But one of the big concerns that I had was going to be about the effectiveness of those Shards of Domination outside of the raid. Are these going to be kind of similar to the perks that came from Uldir back in the Battle for Azeroth days, where these perks only happened in the raid? Because that was kind of a disconnect. It's like, okay, outside of raid, like these things are like pretty poop. So in this case, it looks like the effectiveness of these gems is just going to not be, well, as effective in like PvP or whatnot. But even then, And again, this is all up in the air. Ian is kind of banking on the idea that the item level difference that you get from, you know, what is going to be PvP item level, that is going to overcome what you would get from those raid perks, or maybe they'll have like some sort of equivalent, but I'm pretty certain that they're going to feel overpowered at first, and that they're going to be like kind of nuked down in PvP content just to make sure that PvP is the ideal thing for PvP gear. Raid gear is ideal for raid gear. Sadly, Mike didn't get too much into, well, one, the rate at which we got raid gear, if there's going to be like any new surprises out of that, if extra role tokens were going to be coming out of that. I know that was something that was data mined, or what to do like about like Mythic Plus, if that was going to, you know, what sorts of conflicts are going to come out of that, because we all know that these days between the big three, whichever way to gear is the fastest is going to be like the meta, and people are going to gravitate towards that, and then the discourse is going to be centered largely around that. So that's going to be a continued concern for now. We'll just have to wait for more builds on that. Then Mike brought up something pretty interesting. He talked about item level variance, and how people with a certain item level, like 220 and up, how they do tons and tons and tons more DPS than people that were only 10 item level less. And Ian kind of pushed back on this one. This was really interesting, saying that, well, I don't think it's really a matter of item level having, you know, of like item level inflation, but it was more like skill. It just seems like it's the skill difference between a person who has an item level of 210 and item level that has and someone with an item level of 220 to 20 something. And I kind of buy into that. And it's mostly because Titan Forging isn't really a thing. Warforging isn't really a thing. And so we're seeing this very clear, I think, this is from my observations, I think that there's a very clear separation between people that have a certain item level in relation to the skill of that person. So me, for example, I have an item level of like 220 on my tank. And I feel like I'm only so good at the game. I only put out, you know, numbers that are like so good. Someone who has an item level of like 225 or 230 or something like, or, you know, I think that's about the cap, but anyone who has an item level that's higher than that is clearly playing at a level that I can't compete with, where they have Keystone Master, they are in Mythic Raids, they have Gladiator stuff, and they have, you know, and they've been playing they just play better than I do. I think that's really the long and short of it, and I find that kind of interesting from you know, coming from Mike, who plays at this high level. Maybe it's because he was hearing things from different people. I'm not sure if it's his personal perspective or not, but at least my personal observation, people that are like at the item level, you know, in the 200 item level range, they clearly have plateaued because they don't play Mythic Plus. They don't do those sorts of things, or maybe they like dabble in it a little bit. But people that play at this higher level are clearly just playing at a higher level. Wow, that didn't come out. Then Mike brought up the idea of alts, alt catchup, alt friendliness, or alt unfriendliness. I found it a little bit interesting that Mike brought up Renown as something that was kind of a pain point. As a anecdote, I guess, my hunter has a renown level of, I think, like 20 or something like that, and I don't know what he's been doing. I don't quite recall like what he's been doing, but he hasn't done any of the Covenant campaign yet. I think he only did like the chapter 2, and that's it. He happens to have like level 1 of each of the Covenant Sanctum things, so he has like the anima boost and everything. He hasn't done any of the campaign stuff, and at this point he can, you know, this hunter of mine can go straight through the campaign, and then he'll have like a whole crap ton of renown. He'll have all the soul binds and things like that. However, Ian did talk about the notion of, hey, if you're doing the same Covenant campaign again, that's not a very good feeling. And he compared this to the whole idea of Threads of Fate, the alt game plus, as you will, and acknowledge that, okay, cool, we put in this alt game plus, we put in this the Threads of Fate because we don't want people going through the entire leveling campaign again. And so, for the sake of consistency, it won't be a good idea to have people go through the entire Covenant campaign again as well on their alts. And so he didn't get really specific as to what's going to happen there. I don't know if there's going to be like a just press button to skip like the whole darn thing, and then all of a sudden, boom, you get all these, you get all this renown, you get all the soul binds and things like that. But I think over the next couple of builds, we may see something manifest. He just wasn't very specific on that at the moment. And Ian did bring up a good point. I'm going to read this bullet point from Wowhead, and then I'll try to expand on it. The bullet point says, the hard part is trying to balance the different styles of play. Some players want alts as for the end game, while other players want to play their alts because their main has stalled. And this goes into the difference between people that play at the high end and people that just want to like play and just have a bunch of characters. So the comparison is that, you know, people at the high end, they want to have like multiple mains. Basically, they want to have someone to switch to kind of on the fly and have that alternate main, contribute as well as they could compared to their actual main, something like that. On the other hand, though, by having, if they were to have all these catch-ups and being able to, if there was like no friction, like I think I've seen some comments saying, hey, if you get an item level of 220 on one character, then all of your alts should have in their mailbox a whole kit of item level 210 gear. Boom, just like that. Which I think is, whoa, that's like way too much. But in light of that example, I think that on the other side, there are players who just want to enjoy the journey. And I found that very conniving of Ian to use that. Some people just want to appreciate the journey, and because that really draws into the classic crowd. That's just all about, hey, I just want to level and discover and do things and yada yada yada. And we want to respect that sort of audience too. That's how classic even came about. But I think my takeaway from that is we may get the chance to skip maybe the Maw intro. That'd be kind of nice. Hopefully we'll get like the extra level that comes out of that. But at max level content, at least, we may be able to skip the whole Covenant storyline, or at the very least, if we did it already, we'll get like that button to like skip it, just like what we were seeing, what we see right now, where once we do a certain part, we can skip like a whole chapter, which is like totally great. Then Mike talked about healer DPS, a very high-end topic. I'm not gonna get into this too much, but basically, paladins do way too much. Paladins do way too much DPS. For those of you who didn't watch the MDI, I watched like a little tiny bit of it, and it was just crazy seeing a holy paladin in a boss fight doing top damage, like 12k DPS. It was insane. And I think that is, that's one of the extremes that Blizzard wants to take a look at and try to curb. I know a lot of it comes from Ashen Hollow. And there might be something where, okay, Ashen Hollow's effectiveness in the holy spec for Paladins is going to be like reduced or something like that. Yeah, that might be one of the really quick and dirty fixes that they want to work on. But Ian got more into the idea of, well, what should a skilled healer contribute to a team? And they want to make it so that if you want to do DPS when there's downtime, cool, you should be able to do DPS in when there's downtime. It's the mark of a skilled healer, according to him. But when it comes really easy and naturally, that's the kind of thing that they want to curb. They want DPS contributions from healers to feel like a tougher choice. And right now for Holy Paladins, it's much too easy. And for Discipline, that's always going to be probably a forever problem. And all the other classes like Mistweaver Monks, they're just going to suffer for a little while. But hopefully it'll get to it. There will be some sort of in between to that. I don't see that really happening in this upcoming patch. I think Ashen Hollow might be nerfed for Holy Paladins. That like I said, that might be a quick band-aid fix, but hopefully in like future patches or expansions or whatnots, we'll see a little bit better parity there. Then they talked about anti-magic zone for Death Knights, and I found this one funny because Ian's like, it's too good, and then Mike got really nervous. and then he memed himself out of it, which is totally fine. But for those who don't know, anti-magic zone is DK ability. It provides basically a magic damage reduction bubble, reduces damage taken by 20%. Super strong, kind of a short cooldown. I believe it's a 2-minute cooldown. It's just really good. And so what I think Ian wants to do with that, maybe very tentative, but maybe what they'll do is instead of a percentage of magic reduction, maybe it'll be like a bubble that can break or something like that. It'll have like a fixed value. So like pretend numbers here, it's going to absorb the next 80,000 damage that would be dealt out to anyone who's inside the bubble. Basically, it's going to work in such a way where in Mythic Plus or in a dungeon, it's still going to feel as awesome as it has, but in Raid, it's not going to be like as effective, to the point where they're going to, bring a bunch of DKs instead in lieu of other melee. And that was kind of another topic too, where the idea that Raid teams, especially at the higher end, they will opt to bring fewer melee than ranged. They didn't discuss any solutions of any sorts, just that the team is trying to think of ways to make it so that encounter design focuses on trying to bring a good balance of melee versus ranged. I mean, nothing that's too stringent. It's like they're not going to do something like, oh, if you bring 8 ranged, there's going to be this negative consequence for it. They just want ways to, I guess, encourage a more balanced makeup. Then they talked about the AoE cap and asked how that's working out. That they're not done, according to Ian. This was one of those kind of This was one of those very non-answers that Ian gave. That it wasn't their intention to mess with people who are running low-level content or legacy content who don't have that sort of AoE stuff. I think that personally, I think there are clever ways to go around that by either speccing a certain way or having a certain trinket. I recall this item, this trinket that you can get from the mission table, like a Queen's Blade or something like that, where if you get hit, it does like kind of an AoE on targets when you're hit. So I think that's a really cool way to easily like smoke a bunch of targets all at once. But I know that it's not exactly what people are asking for. I think they're mostly asking for the ability to just like wipe out all these mobs in like one place very easily, so that it's easy to like AoE loot. But as for like the AoE cap, they didn't really have too much to say about it. Just that they're monitoring things, but their intention is still they want a situation where, or I'm sorry, they don't want a situation where the idea is to just keep pulling giant packs, mow them down. They want to try to curb that sort of behavior. Having a target cap might not be the best solution, but there wasn't really much said about it. One item that I actually missed during the stream that I'm just going to kind of inject in here right now was the whole thought on borrowed power, temporary systems, the giveth and taketh away of stuff that's been happening throughout the world of Warcraft over the past, oh goodness, it's gonna be like 6-7 years since this has been a thing, and Ian was a little less forthcoming on it. He was more, I mean, this was more of one of those like developer insight questions, and so he went through like the whole brief history of the challenges that come from adding abilities, the inevitability of ability bloat for systems to kind of collapse on top of each other, and that he wants to, or the team is discussing ways to try and have a better balance between, not being able to just take things away. I joked the other day about the complaints over borrowed power and tier sets, which by the way are going to come in patch 9.2. Yay. the whole thing with tier sets is that as you go from one tier or season to the next, you kind of slide between one system or at least one tier set bonus to the next thing. Just like how we get like, oh, we're going to get a new dungeon in Korthia. So our trinket choices are going to perhaps slide from one thing to the next because we're going to go to Korthia or we're going to go to the Sanctum of Domination. In the case of Borrowed Power, obviously, the disconnect happens as soon as you get to this brand new content. It's like, oh no, I'm here and I'm naked and I'm afraid. And so what the team is talking about is trying to reduce that as best as they can. Like, what can they do to take things away from previous expansions? And so I'm just going to kind of keep throwing my thought out there to introduce some sort of new mandate where there's horizontal progression. The whole idea of, instead of having talent rows or talent trees that get deeper and deeper and deeper, have them get wider, as in having more choices, more selections, but keeping the number of choices that you make the same. Now, I know that there is a world of design behind that as well, because, well, where is this ability going to go? Or are you going to have to choose between one thing or another? And what is the decision-making process between having a certain ability be like on this tier as opposed to this tier? Because I'd really love to have like the synergy between these two talents and yada yada yada. So that again is it gets really complicated. There are tons of questions and holes that you can jump through with regards to that, but at least they talked a little bit about Borrowed Power and the sense that, hey, that later on we might see an end of this road. They did point out pretty clearly that Legion felt like the best use of the whole Borrowed Power mechanic because it happened to be the first time that happened. And now we're going in, but then going into Battle for Azeroth, going into Shadowlands, there's this dread among all of us, and myself included, that's, okay, cool, we're getting these neat things, but we know it's only going to last for only a couple of years until we lose it again. And that's a pretty dreadful feeling. It doesn't feel very roleplay, right? And so I'm looking forward to what's going to happen later. There are other things here that were done throughout the interview that aren't like super relevant to 9.1, but I thought this was like a really important mark to cover. And then finally, Mike asked about a Mage Tower, if there's going to be any sort of like difficult single player content, to which my personal answer was, hey, have you heard of the Path of Ascension for the Kyrian? It's really cool, and it has nothing to do with like player gear, so it's kind of like an evergreen content sort of deal. But in this case, it was more like a general thing. Ian's answer to this was kind of interesting, though. That's, if they wanted to have like a good single player content challenge like the Mage Tower, it's got to come with a pretty cool reward to come with it, so it can feel like this personal accomplishment. As for what that would be, I think it would be up to the suggestions coming from us, whether it's like more appearances. A lot of people have talked about bringing the Mage Tower back in some way, shape, or form to continue to challenge people and have that focused on, I guess, the artifact weapons still. It could be a bunch of things. So, we could, I guess, maybe I'll make a video and talk about different ideas for like, hey, what could we have as a cool single player challenge? And that, I think, covers it. I know I kind of stumbled through and stuttered through a lot of these answers. But overall, again, I think I'm coming away from this Q&A feeling pretty good. At least I felt pretty good about the interactions. I think that there's still a lot more to do when it comes to developers talking directly with content creators or talking with the community as a whole as to like what their thoughts are on certain things. I do at least got to give props to Blizzard every time they are putting out these PTR builds for 9.1. They're including notes. They're trying to include us in what's going on. It's just that there's still a bit too much mystery as to what they intend. I know a lot of it is because it's still kind of up in the air, but I would love for them to like share their thoughts like a little bit more during this whole testing process. Keep us in the loop so that way we can give our feedback like early. and not exactly give feedback based on speculation, because I'm sure that to them that's not very valuable. I'd rather give feedback based on these things that are these buttons that I'm pressing, or these mobs that I'm killing, or these game modes that I'm checking out. So for now, I'm gonna head out. There is going to be a build that comes out this coming week, and you can count on me covering that. If there are really cool things to check out, I'll be really specific, make some separate content on those. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Again, I'll have a link to the actual interview in the description below. Of course, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more of this and all things Warcraft, and I'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy. I am offbeat. Chuka brown brown brown.